The Galactic Senate chamber fell silent as High Counselor of the Empire stood before the assembly of 12 alien species. His blue scales shimmered under the artificial lights as he presented his proposal. The humans of Earth were weak, he claimed. They were a young species that had only recently discovered space travel. More importantly, they had spent centuries suppressing their violent nature through laws, ethics, and something they called civilization. They were ripe for conquest. The intelligence reports seemed clear. Humans no longer hunted. They bought their food from markets. They no longer fought wars of total destruction. They had rules for everything. They punished their own warriors for being too aggressive. They even felt guilt for the violence in their past. They saw this as the ultimate weakness. Ambassador Eth of the Collective raised a concern. Her species had studied humans for decades. She warned that humans were not weak but rather contained. There was a difference, she insisted. The humans had not lost their predatory instincts. They had simply locked them away behind walls of social conditioning, but dismissed her warnings. He called her a coward. He said the fleet would crush Earth in a matter of days. The Senate voted in favor of the invasion by a narrow margin. Eth left the chamber with a heavy heart. She knew they had made a terrible mistake. The invasion began on a quiet Sunday morning. The fleet appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. 200 warships blocked out the sun over major cities. They broadcast a simple message: surrender or die. The humans were given 1 hour to respond. The governments of Earth scrambled to coordinate. Military leaders shouted at each other through video conferences. Politicians debated endlessly about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately to avoid bloodshed. Others wanted to fight but had no plan. The hour passed without a unified response. Smiled from his command ship, he ordered the first strike. The city of Mumbai was chosen as an example. Within seconds, plasma fire rained down from the sky. 10 million souls were erased in a flash of green light. The broadcast the destruction across all frequencies. They wanted the humans to see their power. They wanted them to feel fear. But something unexpected happened in that moment. Across the planet, humans watched their screens in horror. They saw the fire consume their fellow humans. They heard the screams that cut off suddenly. And deep inside their minds, something ancient stirred. It was a feeling that modern humans had almost forgotten. It was the feeling their ancestors knew when predators entered their territory. It was pure, burning rage. Dr. Sarah was a neuroscientist working in Geneva when she saw the broadcast. She had spent her career studying human aggression and how society had learned to control it. She knew better than anyone what the aliens had just done. They had triggered something primal. Every human brain contained ancient circuits designed for survival. These circuits had been suppressed by civilization but never deleted. They were dormant, waiting for the right trigger. Now they were waking up. Within hours, the change became visible. Military recruitment centers that had been nearly empty were suddenly overflowing. People who had never held a weapon in their lives demanded to be trained. Factory workers volunteered to work triple shifts producing weapons. Scientists abandoned their research to develop new technologies for war. It was as if an entire species had received the same signal at the same time. The hunt was on. Landed ground troops in major cities expecting quick surrender. Instead, his soldiers found hell. Civilians who had never fought before ambushed armored aliens with improvised weapons. Office workers formed guerrilla units. Teenagers who had played video games their whole lives turned out to be natural strategists. Grandmothers who had survived old wars came out of retirement to teach younger generations how to kill. The soldiers were shocked. Their intelligence had said humans were soft. Their reports had promised easy victory. Instead, they found a species that seemed to grow stronger with every loss. When one human fell, 10 more appeared to take their place. And there was something terrifying in their eyes. It was not fear or desperation. It was cold, calculated hunger. Commander OK of the ground forces sent panicked reports to the fleet. He described humans who smiled while fighting. He spoke of wounded soldiers who continued attacking until their hearts stopped. He told of prisoners who refused to break under interrogation, who laughed at their captors and promised revenge. His final message before his unit was overrun was simple: "We have made a terrible mistake." The Senate received these reports with growing alarm. Counselor assured them it was temporary. He said the humans would tire eventually. All species did, but weeks passed and the humans showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, they were accelerating. Their factories produced weapons at impossible speeds. Their scientists developed new technologies by working without sleep. Their soldiers fought with a fury that explanation. Ambassador Eth requested permission to study what was happening. She traveled to a captured outpost where human prisoners were being held. What she found there changed her understanding forever. The humans were not fighting out of desperation or nationalism. They were fighting because their very biology demanded it. The invasion had awakened something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. She interviewed a human soldier named. He was badly wounded but refused medical treatment until he finished speaking. He explained it simply. For centuries, humans had told themselves they were civilized. They had buried their violent history. They had created rules to prevent their darker nature from emerging. But those rules were like chains on a sleeping giant. The aliens had broken those chains. Now there was nothing holding humanity back. Eth asked what would happen when the war ended, smiled in a way that made her scales crawl. He said the war would not end with Earth's liberation. It would not end until every world burned. It would not end until every species that voted for this invasion understood the cost of waking a predator. His eyes held no hatred, only certainty. This was not revenge. This was nature. 6 months after the invasion began, human forces had pushed the off-Earth entirely. But they did not stop there. Captured alien ships were reverse-engineered within weeks. Human engineers built new vessels that combined alien technology with human creativity. The results were terrifying. Ships designed not just for defense but for hunting across the stars. The first human strike on a colony world sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The humans had traveled further than anyone thought possible. They struck without warning in the middle of the night cycle. They did not conquer the planet. They burned its military installations and left a message in orbit. This is your first lesson. Many more will follow. The Galactic Senate held an emergency session. Representatives who had voted for the invasion were now terrified for their own worlds. They demanded be held responsible. But responsibility would not save them. The humans had obtained the Senate's voting records. They knew exactly which species had supported their destruction. Tried to negotiate. He sent diplomatic ships to propose a ceasefire. The humans destroyed them without responding. He offered to surrender unconditionally. The humans ignored his offers. He begged for mercy through every communication channel available. The humans finally answered. They sent back a recording of Mumbai burning. No other message was needed. The war continued for 3 more years. One by one, the worlds that had voted for invasion fell silent. The humans did not commit genocide. That would have been too quick. Instead, they dismantled civilizations piece by piece. They destroyed military capabilities. They wrecked economic systems. They left populations alive but helpless. And they made sure everyone remembered why. Ambassador Eth became the primary negotiator for the remaining Senate members. Her species had warned against the invasion. The humans recognized this and spared the worlds. She spent years building a fragile peace, trying to help the humans rediscover their restraint. The final meeting of the war took place on the ruins of The human representative was an old woman named Dr. Sarah. She had become a leader among her people, one of the few voices counseling eventual mercy. She stood before the broken remains of the Galactic Senate and delivered humanity's terms. The terms were harsh but not impossible. Alien species would respect human space absolutely. They would provide resources to rebuild Earth. They would never again vote on matters involving humanity without human consent. And most importantly, they would remember. They would teach their children what happened when predators were pushed too far. They would never forget the price of waking a sleeping species. High Counselor was brought before Doctor in chains. His scales had turned gray with stress and age. He looked at the woman who had once studied aggression in a laboratory. Now she was the face of human vengeance. He asked her one question: how could his intelligence have been so wrong about humanity? Doctor considered the question for a long moment. Then she answered: human civilization was not the absence of violence. It was violence under control. For thousands of years, humans had built systems to contain their darkest impulses. They had created laws and ethics and cultures specifically to prevent themselves from doing what they were capable of doing. They had seen this containment and mistaken it for weakness. They had not understood that the cage existed, because what was inside needed to be caged. Asked if humans would ever return to their peaceful ways, Doctor shook her head slowly. That peace had been built on safety. Humanity had believed the universe was empty or at least not threatening. Now they knew better. They would never suppress their predatory nature so deeply again. They would always be watching. They would always be ready. The old was taken away to face judgment for his crimes. Doctor watched him go with something like pity. He had wanted to conquer a weak species and add their world to his empire. Instead, he had created the greatest predator the galaxy had ever seen. The humans would never forget what had been done to them, and the galaxy would never forget what humans could do when properly motivated. The stars themselves seemed dimmer now to those who looked up from alien worlds. Every species knew that somewhere out there, humanity was watching. They had learned the hardest lesson the universe could teach: never wake a sleeping predator, and never, under any circumstances, give them a reason to hunt you.